tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. I first encountered the Joanna Macy's work through a book that a lot of folks first encountered her through. Her first kind of great or best-selling classic, "World is Love or World is Self," and it was like this book that's been mentioned. With Arne Næss and other founders of the deep ecology movement. So this book, World is Love or World is Self, for me was also one of my doorways into the work of Næss and others in deep ecology. Gary Snyder also was in that mix for me. And part of what was so compelling about Joanna was that she moved in these various channels all at once. She wasn't. She was a poet and a writer of inspirational, action urging, but also emotion uplifting work on love for the earth. But she was also, a brilliant, very technical scholar writing on systems theory, and like I said, her dissertation was on the relationship of the Buddha's theories of causality and conditionality, including dependent origination and general systems theory, and she did a fair amount of work in Sri Lanka connecting with both activists in the Sarvodaya movement, which was a social uplift movement rooted in Buddhist principles, and partly founded by the great Sri Lankan activist A.T. Ariyaratne, and connected to Gandhism and other satyagraha ideas from the Gandhi movement, and that weave bringing her connection to from classical Buddhist philosophical and theory into the scientific realm in systems theory and into the social change realm, initially through Sarvodaya, gives her this grounding in a way that is both emotive and technical and spiritual, and that really came through the rest of her work, that she had these other channels besides. It wasn't just that she was a Dharma practitioner that came upon this grief work and moved that through, but her foundations in deep ecology and in intellectual deep ecology came through in the way that she theorized her work. And so at different points in my study, that's been really important and helpful for me. And it was actually only many years after I had been relating to her work from a Buddhist theory point of view, and in the deep ecology kind of literature, that I found this book of hers called "In Praise of Mortality," selections from Rainer Maria Rilke's Duino Elegies and Sonnets to Orpheus. And so Joanna had lived in Germany for a time and had become fluent in German as part of her studies, and reports picking up a German copy of one of Rilke's lesser known books, called the Book of Hours. It's in a way like, which is a reference to the Christian model of the Book of Hours. In a certain way, it's his most reverent or prayerful collection. It's a beautiful, very readable, simple collection, simple, ish, simple for Rilke, collection of poems. and finding this line that that translates as "I live my life in widening circles," and which becomes in a way one of the slogans of her work and inspires her in her commitment to deep ecology. And so, many years after she had become well known for her deep ecology work and her Buddhist scholarship, she goes back to Rilke, and she released this book translating selections from the Elegies and the Sonnets to Orpheus um, with another poet and translator, Anita Barrows, also part of the deep ecology world, um, and these are stunning, beautiful translations, and you can I feel like I can I can hear I can hear her Dharma in them. Um, she pulls out this line from the Sonnets of Orpheus, the Sonnets to Orpheus. Oh, the knowledge of impermanence that haunts our days is their very fragrance. And, she could have used various words, change or whatnot. Um, but she uses impermanence, of course, which, rings the Buddhist temple bell and speaks to the um, a particular tone in her work that brings out this aspect, even though she was in Sri Lanka, a Theravadan country, that, brings out an aspect of the traditional Buddhist teachings that in a sense gets more play in the Mahayana world than the Theravadan, which is that the very um, the nature of the world as flawed or shot through with loss, um, the impermanence of the world, that it's not just a characteristic or a thing to understand with wisdom and therefore let go, but that it has an aesthetic quality, it has an emotive quality. The knowledge of impermanence that haunts our days is their very fragrance. It's a way of saying that the characteristic of impermanence is always present, always palpable, but to say that it's a fragrance makes it intimate, sensuous, even beautiful, right? And so she really brings this out. The world is not just a field of suffering to be transcended, but it is, like in the title of her book, world as lover, world as self. The world is something that can be identified with or can be adored, or both, of course. And so uh, when I was in grad school, um, I played hooky from performance studies and critical theory that I was mostly doing, and I took uh, a graduate poetry workshop, which was all creative writing majors, getting masters in creative writing and taking poetry, and the teacher um, sort of auditioned me. I got to sit in on a conversation, and I had to say a couple intelligent things about poetry, and then he was like, "Okay, you can stay." So he let me stay, and we read a bunch of poems, and um, the end project for the poetry class was to compile a little collection and write an essay about the poems that you chose and why and what connects them. And I made a little collection of um, uh, spiritually oriented poems coming out of the kind of Asian diaspora, and so I just wrote about the poems that I loved, and so Gary Snyder was in there, and Mirabai, translated by Robert Bly, and a variety of things, the Sunstone. Um, and I included a poem from this collection of Joanna and Anita Barrows on Rilke, and the poetry teacher's note on the particular, Rilke poem that I chose was um, was was strange. I can never hear Rilke in the absence of the long line, which was a very technical response. Rilke poetry is known for a very particular long line, and there's a rhythm in Rilke that has to do with these long lines, you know, and this very sustained rhythm in it. And part of what Macy and Barrows do in this is that they break up the long lines into a much more sort of like short line, breathy, free verse, very modern free verse kind of approach, much more Gary Snyder than Rilke in a certain way. And you'll hear, so if you're familiar with other translations of Rilke, like Robert Bly's translations that preserve the long line, or if you can read the Rilke in German, bless you, you'll feel the difference here in the short line. And that's the last thing about technical poetry I'm going to say. But I want to read a couple of these. So in honor of Elder Joanna and all of the beauty and the good work she brought into the world, and the fact that she brought in poems as well as everything else is just something to aspire to as a scholar and lover of Dharma and lover of poems. So here's the poem that contains the impermanence line. This is poem 27 from part 2 of the Sonnets to Orpheus. Does time, as it passes, really destroy? It may rip the fortress from its rock, but can this heart that belongs to God be torn from him by circumstance? Are we as fearfully fragile as fate would have us believe? Can we ever be severed from childhood's deep promise? Ah, the knowledge of impermanence that haunts our days is their very fragrance. We, in our striving, think we should last forever, but could we be used by the divine if we were not ephemeral? Here's poem 29 in the same sequence. Quiet friend who has come so far, feel how your breathing makes more space around you. Let this darkness be a bell tower and you the bell. As you ring, what batters you becomes your strength. Move back and forth into the change. What is it like, such intensity of pain? If the drink is bitter, turn yourself to wine. In this uncontainable night, be the mystery at the crossroads of your senses, the meaning discovered there. And if the world has ceased to hear you, say to the silent earth, I flow. To the rushing water, speak, I am. In this uncontainable night, be the mystery at the crossroads of your senses, the meaning discovered there. And if the world has ceased to hear you, say to the silent earth, I flow. To the rushing water, speak, I am. So the Duino Elegies are 9 poems, 9 elegies. Kind of want to read them all to you. I won't, but here's the first one. I think maybe I'll read the first and the 9th. Here's the first one. If I cried out, who in the hierarchies of angels would hear me? And if one of them should suddenly take me to his heart, I would perish in the power of his being. For beauty is but the beginning of terror. We can barely endure it, and are awed when it declines to destroy us. Every angel is terrifying in that way. So I hold myself back and let my scream for help be swallowed by sobbing. Oh, to what then can we turn in our need? Not to an angel, not to a person. Animals, perceptive as they are, notice that we are not really at home in this world of ours. Perhaps there is a particular tree we see every day on the hillside, or a street we have walked, or the warped loyalty of a habit that does not abandon us. Oh, and night, the night, when wind hurls the universe at our faces, for whom is night not there? Longed for and softly disappointing, it envelops each solitary heart. Is night easier for lovers who can hide from their fate in each other? Do you still not know how little endures? Fling the nothing you are grasping out into the spaces we breathe. Maybe the birds will feel in their flight how the air has expanded. Can you see? Springtimes have needed you, and there are stars expecting you to notice them. From out of the past, a wave rises to meet you the way the strains of a violin come through an open window just as you walk by. As if it were all by design. But are you the one designing it? Were you not always distracted by yearning, as though some lover were about to appear? Let yourself feel it, that longing. Let yourself feel it, that yearning. It connects you with those who have sung it through the ages, sung especially of love unrequited. Shouldn't this oldest of sufferings finally bear fruit for us? Is it not time to free ourselves from the beloved, even as we, trembling, endure the loving? As the arrow endures the bowstring's tension, so that, released, it travels farther. For there is nowhere to remain. Just noticing, coming out of the poem, words that resonate, feelings that are here. I don't actually really know how to keep giving a Dharma talk after reading a poem like that. There's nothing I want to say to make it better. So I'm not going to try it. So pausing for a moment. My sweetheart and I actually put that last stanza on our wedding invitation, which, maybe says something about a Dharma couple more connected with the existential nature of being lovers than, some more romantic ideal. Um, right? Shouldn't this oldest of sufferings finally bear fruit for us? Like, yeah, may it be so. Is it not time to free ourselves from the beloved, even as we, trembling, endure the loving? As the arrow endures the bowstring's tension, so that, released, it travels farther. for there is nowhere to remain. There's an understanding, I think, in wise poetry that touches on the mystery of lovers, that understands that there's both, that there's both connection and a space between, and a mystery in that space between. Throughout all of these poems, in Rilke, there's this tension or mystery in his relationship with what sometimes in here gets called God, with the divine or with the ineffable, and how that is reflected or not, or irradiates this human love these human loves that we find ourselves in. All right, here's the ninth of the, I'll read you one more. So here's the ninth of the Duino Elegies, the last one. So the elegies are a whole arc. So I just read you the first one. So your homework is to go back and read all the rest. But here's the ninth one so that you get the landing of the arrow. Why, if it's possible to come into existence as laurel, say, a little darker green than other trees, with ripples edging each leaf like the smile of a breeze, why then do we have to be human and keep running from the fate we long for? Oh, not because of such a thing as happiness, that fleeting gift before the loss begins. Not from curiosity or to exercise the heart, but because simply to be here is so much, and because what is here seems to need us, this vanishing world that concerns us strangely, us, the most vanishing of all. Once for each, only once, once and no more, and we too, just once, never again. But to have lived even this once, to have been of earth, that cannot be taken from us. And so a hunger drives us. We want to contain it all in our naked hands, our brimming senses, our speechless hearts. We want to become it, or offer it. But to whom? We would hold it forever. But after all, what can we keep? Not the beholding, so slow to learn, not anything that has happened here, nothing. There are the hurts, and always the hardships, and there's the long knowing of love, all of it unsayable. Later, amidst the stars, we will see these are better unsaid. The mountain wanderer does not carry back into the valley a handful of earth. That is unsayable. But a word, simple and clean, the blue and yellow gentian. Could we be here then in order to say house, bridge, fountain, gate, pitcher, apple tree, window, or at most pillar, tower? But to say them, in fact, oh, to utter them as even the things never thought themselves to be. Is it not the secret stratagem of our unspeaking earth to have lovers express her abundance as she drives them into each other's arms? Threshold. What is it like for two lovers to step over the same ancient threshold that so many have crossed before them and so many will cross again? Here is the time for telling. Here is its home. Speak and make known. More and more the things we could experience are lost to us, banished by our failure to imagine them. Old definitions which once set limits to our living break apart like dried crusts. Between hammers pounding, the heart exists, like the tongue between the teeth, which still, however, does the praising. Praise the world to the angel, leave the unsayable aside. Your exalted feelings do not move him. In the universe where he feels feelings, you are a beginner. Therefore, show him what is ordinary, what has been shaped from generation to generation, shaped by hand and eye. Tell him of things. He will stand still in astonishment, the way you stood by the rope maker in Rome or by the potter on the Nile. Show him how happy a thing can be, how innocent and ours, how even a lament takes pure form, serves as a thing, dies as a thing, while the violin, blessing it, fades. And the things, even as they pass, understand that we praise them. Transient, they are trusting us to save them, us, the most transient of all. As if they wanted, in their inevitable hearts, to be transformed into, oh, endlessly, into us. Earth, isn't this what you want? To arise in us indivisible? Is it not your dream to enter us so wholly there's nothing left outside us to see? What, if not transformation, is your deepest purpose? Earth, my love, I want that too. Believe me, no more of your springtimes are needed to win me over. Even one flower is more than enough. Before I was named, I belonged to you. I seek no other law but yours, and know I can trust the death you will bring. See, I live. On what? Childhood and future are equally present. Sheer abundance of being floods my heart. Over this past week, some of Joanna's friends who visited her remarked on how joyful she was heading into her death, and how she said she was excited and looked forward to what was next, and trusted, deeply, deeply trusted the process and her being of earth. The process she developed and made famous in her work with the work that reconnects is a process that is a spiral in a way of coming out of denial, looking deeply at what's true, including that which is painful, that which is ugly, that which is suffering in the world, that for which we have grief, for loss, for what's happening in climate, for all that is lost. And the core intuition in this work is that grief is necessary and wholesome and rich and not an endpoint, and that we have to feel it and breathe through it and come through it into what she called seeing with new eyes. And that there's a way that until we really feel and process the grief we hold, and you feel it in some of these poems, as the way that she is drawn to Rilke's words, but also the way that she translates his words, bringing out those threads of the mystery of what it is to be human in our transience with the transient world, and the how to love amid all that. She found and taught and developed in extraordinary richness this core insight throughout her work, that you work to save that which you love, but you can't do it. You can't do it out of anger or fear or panic or hatred, but that you have to come through the the grief and loss that's always there once you contact reality. This is a deeply Buddhist insight, that to come into direct knowing of the world around us, our bodies, the world, those we love, is always to encounter the reality of loss, of death, and to encounter that reality and somehow bypass the grieving deprives us both of the life that's there and the goodness that's there, but also of the energy that we might come out from that experience with. If we see the world only through the eyes that are angry for the loss or the unprocessed grief for the loss, we miss this mysterious, fecund aliveness that is here. And so, knowing this, she develops this process where, through meditation and reflection, conversations, sometimes movement, song, uh, engaging with our senses, engaging with uh, the material that's so viscerally present as we contact the world, we come through the stage of coming out of denial, contacting the world, being with our grief, and then emerging to see the world with new eyes and to come into action in a new way. And so, again and again, she stitched this work, and you see it in the folks who have learned from her and been inspired by her, that um, although some of her work, especially in the early part of her career, dealt with some of the most grief-worthy environmental calamities possible, like what to do with nuclear waste and how long it will be with us, uh, that you feel in her legacy and in the people who studied with her a deep joy and love for the earth and creativity and expression. And so, just uplifting this this particular wisdom, the wisdom of coming through grief into seeing the world with new eyes and coming out with a kind of joy that is not just, that doesn't just survive contact with the calamities that are happening, but that is actually strengthened and greater and more radiant because of contact with the calamities that happened. So, blessings on her life, blessings in her death. May all those touched by her work be inspired into deeper love for the earth, for ourselves, care for each other, action in defense of that which is good and that which we love, and a deepening in the practice that understands everything as wildly, intimately, erotically interconnected, joyfully interconnected. May remember the impermanence that haunts our days and feel it as their very fragrance. All right, thank you.